To go through the worst pick in every round is going to be tough because at the very top of drafts, obviously, these are all good players. Like round one, if we're looking at the consensus ADP posted on flogfantasy.com, where we're taking the average ADP from ESPN, Sleeper, Yahoo, FFPC, and Underdog drafts, we are looking at Jamar Chase, Bijan Robinson, Barkley, Gibbs, Jefferson, Lamb, McCaffrey, Puka Nacua, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Ashton Jeanty, and Derrick Henry. To pick the quote-unquote worst player in this range is going to be incredibly tough because realistically, they all could finish top 3 in fantasy and total points scored. Except there's one guy that I don't think can, and that's going to be Derrick Henry in full PPR formats. Now, yes, you're going to roll your eyes because I was the idiot who said not to draft Derrick Henry last year. I was the idiot who said not to draft Derrick Henry 2 years ago. He got hurt, so technically that was a dub. But regardless, we are right back for year 3. Now, with Henry, I have to bend the knee. I have to admit that he is the king. He is a Hall of Fame running back, and he is one of the best running backs that I have ever seen. Now, with all that in mind, let me at least address why I don't think he has the same ceiling that you would find with Ashton Jeanty, McCaffrey, Gibbs, Barkley, Bijan at the running back position. And that is going to hinge all around his receiving usage. Because if we go ahead and look at Derrick Henry this past year, he ran 3.5 routes per game. You heard that correctly. 3.5 routes per game. You're looking at a running back that had a total of 22 targets, 193 receiving yards. So even if Derrick Henry does lead the NFL in rushing, even if he leads the NFL in rushing touchdowns, his ceiling is going to be capped around 19.5 points per game. That's what we saw this past season. Now, I don't think it's a guarantee that he hits the ceiling either because there are a couple different outcomes that could play out here. One, the aging running back could see a drop-off in efficiency, which we've seen that historically dating back to the year 2008. If I use the range of outcomes tool on flogfantasy.com, we will see the running backs that had the most similar age 30 seasons involve Adrian Peterson. Not sure if you've heard of him, but he's pretty damn good at the game of football. And Adrian Peterson went from 16.5 points per game at 30 years old down to 3 points per game at 31. Once you get into your 30s as a running back, you can naturally see that absolute fall off a cliff with your production. We saw Frank Gore fall from about 12 points per game down to 9.9. We saw LeGarrette Blount fall from 14.5 down to 6.7. We saw Chris Johnson fall from about 10 to 4. We saw Fred Jackson fall from about 21 to 11.5. We saw Mark Ingram fall from 16 to 4.8. So if we are looking across the board, there were other Hall of Fame level running backs that had good age 30 seasons that fell off a cliff at 31. And Derrick Henry is not a spry 31 years old either. Derrick Henry in January is going to be turning 32. Now, am I going to sit here and tell you that Derrick Henry is guaranteed to fall off a cliff? No, not at all. But I do think the ceiling is a little bit capped in full PPR formats because he only ran 3.5 routes per game last year. And at the same time, I do think that you have the red flag with his age that isn't represented across all round one picks. So it's very difficult for me to say that there's any bad round one selection. But to be honest with you, for full PPR formats, I do have Devon Achane, who's a round 2 selection ranked ahead of Derrick Henry, even though I expect Derrick Henry to obviously be a significantly better running back, actually getting you rushing yards and rushing touchdowns. Now going over to round 2, this is also a very difficult spot because if we look at the ADP consensus list on the site, you have Nico Collins, Devon Achane, Brian Thomas, Brock Bowers, Drake London, AJ Brown, Jonathan Taylor, Josh Jacobs, Bucky Irving, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Trey McBride. I can't see a single player here and go, oh yeah, they're a bum. Cross them off the board. I'd never draft this guy. So I am kind of grasping at straws. I'm trying to come up with a player that I do think is a little bit worse than the other options. And if I had to come away with one, I'm going to be looking at Jonathan Taylor. Now with Jonathan Taylor, we remember that he won people millions of dollars on Underdog last season. Yes, you can go ahead and you can see that in week 16 and 17, he had 40 points against the Titans, and then he had 28 points against the Giants. So he was the number 1 running back in fantasy semifinals weeks and the number 1 running back during the fantasy championship for a lot of people. Now, the hesitation that I'm going to have with Jonathan Taylor is twofold. I'm making these videos for a full PPR format. Of course, I have draft sheets posted in half PPR leagues and non-PPR leagues as well on the site for you. So if you play in a different format, I promise I got you covered. We have the 50 draft sheets posted on flogfantasy.com, so you can use an exact draft sheet for your platform, for your league settings, and there, Jonathan Taylor, Derrick Henry may be phenomenal selections. But if you don't already have access to those 50 draft sheets, you can find them on flogfantasy.com. Again, we have the best fantasy football offer you are ever going to find. Not only do you get my 50 draft sheets, but you also get 4 draft guides from the other creators on the site, plus all of our weekly rankings, all of our rest of season rankings updated every single week until January 1st, access to all the tools on flogfantasy.com, including the range of outcomes, the player comparison, the My Teams page, as well as Trade Calculator and Trade Finder. And it's only $34, not a subscription. It's a one-time payment. And if you use promo code FLOCK, I'm going to be answering your start sit questions and your trade questions in the live stream every night. You can find the link to flogfantasy.com in the description and comment section. But if we're looking at Jonathan Taylor, very similar issues that you're going to have to Derrick Henry. The receiving involvement is almost non-existent. We go ahead and we look at this past year. You have Jonathan Taylor with an 8% team target share. You go over to 2023, Jonathan Taylor had a 7.6% team target share. Over the past 2 seasons, he's averaged about 1.5 receptions per game. And this past year, he was under 10 receiving yards per game. So what a running back like Jonathan Taylor is going to have to rely upon, same thing that Derrick Henry needs, is you're going to need the rushing touchdown volume, because there are 2 different things that running backs can have in fantasy that are high value touches. They're going to be the targets out of the backfield, because generally yards per target will be higher than yards per carry. Combine that with the fact that if you're playing in a full PPR format, you're just getting a cheap little point for a reception, and you need touches at the goal line. Good news for you is Jonathan Taylor had 1.3 carries inside the 5-yard line this past season. Derrick Henry had 1.2 carries inside the 5-yard line per game. So obviously the rushing touchdowns were there for both extremely talented running backs. The concern that I may have with Jonathan Taylor is if we look at the quarterback play this season, we know that both Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones are mobile quarterbacks. We know that Anthony Richardson will for sure be a threat to steal rushing touchdowns at the goal line. And we know that Daniel Jones is not historically a quarterback that's going to dump the ball off a lot to the running back out of the backfield. So no matter what, the receiving involvement is going to be lowered for Jonathan Taylor based off their quarterback personnel. And if Anthony Richardson is the starter, we can assume Anthony Richardson steals some of those goal line carries. So I'm a little bit concerned with Jonathan Taylor if you have to take him in the middle of the second round of your ESPN draft. Now, if you're drafting in a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex format, there is a lot more exciting than if you were drafting in a double flex full PPR league, where I'd rather just take Drake London, AJ Brown. Now, going over to round 3, again, these are still very talented players. It's very difficult for me to find someone that we don't like. The round 3 options are Ladd McConkey, Chase Brown, Kyron Williams, Tyreek Hill, T. Higgins, Jaden Daniels, George Kittle, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Jalen Hurts, Garrett Wilson, James Cook. If we are looking at the last guy in round 3, though, this would be my choice that I'm probably not drafting. And we're going to be looking at Devonte Adams. Now, the issues with Devonte Adams, there are 3 main ones. One, I have to at least address the fact that Devonte Adams is going to be 33 years old this year. And I completely understand that everybody wants to ignore history. They want to look at the fact that Derrick Henry crushed last year, and really all the old running backs crushed last season. And they want to say age is just a number. It doesn't matter anymore, yada, yada, yada. And they want to ignore all the running backs drafted in 2017, the wide receivers drafted in 2014 that have already fallen off the face of the planet. They want to ignore that Ezekiel Elliott's no longer a thing. They want to ignore that Leonard Fournette's no longer a thing. They want to ignore that Dalvin Cook's no longer a thing. They want to ignore that Austin Eckler's turned to dust. They want to ignore that Aaron Jones may be nothing this year, right? Age does matter, even if Derrick Henry has been able to stay alive up until this point. Devonte Adams, I do think you actually have the slight concern that he may fall off the face of the planet at 33, because we've seen some other elite level wide receivers do just that. Reggie Wayne fell from 17.5 points per game at 32 down to 12.1 at 33. Wes Welker fell from 16 points per game at 32 down to 7 points per game at 33. You had Deshaun Jackson staying about the same. Andre Johnson fell from 17.5 down to 12.5. And the highest ceiling that we saw from any wide receiver in their age 33 season since the year 2008 was Antonio Brown with 17.3 points per game. The second main issue that I'm going to be looking at with Devonte Adams is the fact that it is not possible for him to lead the Rams in targets this year. If we go ahead and look at the efficiency displayed from Puka Nacua over the past few seasons, it is almost impossible to project that Devonte Adams is able to earn the wide receiver 1 slot on this team. Puka Nacua over the past 2 years has had 2.71 yards per route run as a rookie and 4.07 yards per route run as a second-year player. That is preposterous. And if we look at Devonte Adams, the efficiency has declined in his age 31 and age 32 season. You are seeing his yards per route run be dramatically lower in comparison to when he was in his late 20s, where you see 2.03 and 2.08 yards per route run. I understand that definitely Stafford could be an upgrade over Aaron Rodgers, but that's the third concern that we have right now, that we have so much noise with this Matthew Stafford back injury that it isn't super likely I can sit here and tell you, yeah, the Rams are a top 5 offense this year. The Rams are going to support the wide receivers the way that they did in the past. Matthew Stafford has missed a hell of a lot of reps in training camp. I mean, these are important reps as well. We're in the middle of August at this point. So I think you have to be worried about Stafford. I think you have to be worried about the natural age, where if I'm looking at other wide receivers in this round, like I think Ladd McConkey could absolutely crush in year 2. Tyreek Hill, you do at least have the ceiling case from 2 years ago that Devonte Adams hasn't shown you in 3 years. T. Higgins, we saw him be a top 5 wide receiver in points per game this past season. So if I had to choose a player in round 3 that I'm concerned with, it would be Adams. Now going over to round 4, same issue that we have. These are exciting names. Breece Hall, Marvin Harrison, Amari Hampton, Mike Evans, Terry McLaurin, Joe Burrow, Kenneth Walker, Alvin Kamara, Chuba Hubbard, DK Metcalf, DJ Moore, and Rashee Rice. I'm going to focus in on DK Metcalf. Now with Metcalf, I completely understand. We all know he looks like me. He's built like me. And everybody wants to say, oh, if you're built like Mason Dodd, you are destined to be a top 10 wide receiver in fantasy. That hasn't been the case for DK Metcalf up until this point. DK Metcalf has had 1 year in his NFL career finishing higher than wide receiver 20 in points per game. We've seen Metcalf for 6 seasons now. 4 of them, he was a low-end wide receiver 2. 1 of them, he was a low-end wide receiver 3. And the other, he was a low-end wide receiver 1. And we haven't seen that wide receiver 1 finish since the year 2020. And if we also look at the overall offensive environment that you're going to have with the Pittsburgh Steelers, while we can project Metcalf to probably see a career high with his target share, maybe getting up to 27% of this team's targets, you have Arthur Smith. You have a team that is dedicated to running the football and dedicated to maybe driving the offense through the tight ends. So I think Metcalf is going to be a phenomenal real-life player where he's going to be able to stretch NFL defenses, create space underneath for this running game. And I think that the Steelers made a great play in going and getting DK Metcalf. But we have never seen Metcalf dominate volume at the NFL level. And at the same time, we shouldn't expect super efficient quarterback play at this point from Aaron Rodgers. And the coaching staff is going to be a rush-first team. And if we go over and we look at the sportsbook props that we posted over there on flockfantasy.com. Not that we are taking props or anything. I just looked at all the major sports books and gathered that data specifically for your fantasy drafts. We can see that sports books are currently putting the Pittsburgh Steelers to score about 370.5 points this year, which is only ahead of the Colts, the Raiders, the Titans, the Jets, the Giants, the Saints, and the Browns. Now, let's move over to another player that I kind of have to tell you not to draft. And this is the first time I can be confident in saying this. Round 5, your options are James Conner, Xavier Worthy, Sam Laporta, Cortland Sutton, Devonta Smith, Mahomes, Zay Flowers, George Pickens, Jameson, Mixon, David Montgomery, and Ted McMillan. And if we're looking at Joe Mixon, the natural fall off was already coming. I mean, we can actually look at the range of outcomes tool on flockfantasy.com. You can get a sense of what should we expect for running backs with a Mixon profile at age 28 to do what Mixon just did. And we can see that from 28 to 29, almost every single one of these running backs got worse. You had Steven Jackson fall from about 15 points per game to 12.5. You had Aaron Jones fall from 14.5 to 12.5. You had Mark Ingram fall from 17.5 to about 12. Marshawn Lynch fell from about 19 to 11.8. Fred Jackson from 13.5 to 11.5. DeMarco Murray from 18.5 to 11.5. Chris Johnson from 15 down to 7. And Darren McFadden from 12 to 4. The only running back that did not get worse with this similar Mixon profile was actually Jamal Charles. And we are looking at an outlier in that instance. So Mixon was already on the decline. You look at the offensive moves that the Houston Texans made this offseason, and we can see that this is going to be a worse offensive line than it was a year ago. This coaching staff looks like they want to be a little bit more pass happy as well. Plus all the injury stuff that we have going on with Mixon. Mixon's been in a boot. Mixon hasn't been at training camp. We actually had this team going out there and multiple times over investing into the running back position this offseason by going and taking Woody Marks, a pass-catching running back on day 3 of the NFL draft, and following that up by signing Nick Chubb when they realized that this Joe Mixon injury was serious. So I think Mixon round 5 would have been a bad pick kind of regardless, but the fact that he isn't healthy and we have no idea when we're getting him back to Houston makes it just an obnoxiously bad pick. Now, going over to round 6, this is going to be more like a strategy thing here in the middle rounds. Your options are going to be Travis Hunter, TJ Hawkinson, DeAndre Swift, Trevon Henderson, Jalen Waddle, Baker Mayfield, Calvin Ridley, Travis Kelce, Isaiah Pacheco, Caleb Johnson, and Aaron Jones. Now, what I am seeing in ESPN, Sleeper, Yahoo drafts are people fill out their starting lineup in their drafts. They go, okay, I'm going to take a running back, then a wide receiver, another running back, then a wide receiver. I'll take a wide receiver in round 5 for my flex. And I'm sitting here in round 6 and it's like, oh, okay, I can take another wide receiver for my bench, take another running back for my bench, or might as well, why don't I just go fill out my starting lineup? Why don't I take Baker Mayfield here in the 6th round? Why don't I take Travis Kelce here in the 6th round? And that is the exact opposite way that you want to be going about it. The values here in these middle rounds are not the quarterbacks. They are not the tight ends. You're looking at Travis Kelce last year, averaging 12.2 fantasy points per game at 35. And now he's going into his age 36 season. We can go ahead and we can look at the range of outcomes tool on the site. The similar tight ends in their age 35 year, like Antonio Gates, he fell from 13.5 points per game down to about 10.5. Ben Watson didn't play the next year. Jason Witten didn't play the next year. Delaney Walker didn't play the next year. Greg Olsen didn't play the next year. Jimmy Graham didn't play the next year. Most of these tight ends retired before they're 36. Kelce's running it back one more time. I think if you got Kelce in like an underdog draft to pick 100, sure, by all means, go ahead and take a stab there. But in your regular redraft league, don't feel like you get to round 6. You need to reach rounds on a tight end just because you already have enough running back or wide receiver production. And I could keep on doing this trend and I could tell you, oh, the worst pick in round 7 is also a tight end with Mark Andrews, blah, blah, blah. But I think we can kind of safely say that we all understand that. So I'm going to move on and just point out that Brian Robinson in round 7 doesn't look like a great selection, where we've already seen Brian Robinson through a little nice stretch of his NFL career. And it seems like Brian Robinson always dealing with an injury. You always have an excuse for why he isn't producing, but ultimately the excuses have to run out when you see you over a large enough sample. Because we've had Brian Robinson for 3 years now in his NFL career. No season where he managed to play 16 games. And he has increased his snap rate every year of his NFL career from 42% to 52% to 55%. However, the efficiency just simply has not been there. You actually have only 11.4 fantasy points per game this past year, despite Jaden Daniels finally elevating this offense. And the issue is the receiving involvement fell dramatically from year 2 to year 3, from about 14 routes run per game down to about 8. We add on the fact that now you actually have some rookie hype coming out of Washington, and you still have Austin Eckler. So the ceiling's going to be capped for Brian Robinson almost regardless based off what we've historically seen. And you're getting squeezed for touches on both ends. Now going over to round 8, I'm going to have to just do the cop out. Probably don't want to be just reaching on your tight end here. I already posted that on the site with all these sportsbook projections, but sportsbooks don't love Evan Ingram this year, surprisingly enough. And I think a big reason Evan Ingram's getting selected here again is just given what you have with people drafting their wide receivers, running backs, quarterback in their ESPN draft and then going, oh, okay, I guess I'll take my tight end now. You're much better off in this range hammering wide receiver and going and getting somebody like a Ricky Pearsall. Maybe you grab Stephon Diggs, you grab Deebo Samuel, and then just getting Colson Loveland in a couple rounds or Tyler Warren in a couple rounds. If you look at Evan Ingram, you've had really one season where he moved the needle over the past 5 years, or honestly, I guess you could say that in 2022, he was okay averaging 10.5 points per game. But in 2023, yeah, he gave you a strong season. He averaged 13.5 points per contest, but that fell off this past year. The Jags just completely move on from him. He's going to be 31 years old this next season. And if we go through and look at every 30-year-old season that comps similarly to Evan Ingram since year 2008, the only tight end to manage to get better from age 30 to 31 was Owen Daniels. Now, obviously, the situation's much better. I really like Bo Nix. I don't really like many pass catchers in Denver. So I would be okay with you drafting Evan Ingram here. I just think that you have straight up better tight ends in rounds 9 and 10 at a cheaper cost. Cam Scatterboot will be our next option in round 9. In this range, grab your first quarterback. Go get Fields. Go get Dak Prescott. Go get Goff. If you waited on tight end, here's where you want Tyler Warren. Here's where you want Tucker Kraft. Because again, don't be taking Travis Kelce in round 6 if you can get Tyler Warren in round 9. And if we look at Cam Scatterboot at this point, it seems like he's straight up lost the job to Tyrone Tracy. Now, obviously, Scatterboot could be one of these running backs that increases his role as the year goes on. Maybe he is like last year's Tyrone Tracy in a way. And I absolutely loved him coming out of college. If he went on day 2 of the NFL draft, if somehow he snuck into round 2, I'd be all about him because he has the size and he has the receiving skill set to be a true workhorse. Now, the athleticism is definitely a question mark at this point. But if you're the running back 2 in one of the league's worst offenses, I don't know how excited we could be about you. Obviously, we could have picked Quinshon Judkins to be the worst pick in this round, but I felt like that was a little bit of a cop-out. Our next round, we are going to be going with Raadre Stevenson. This is also a round where if you waited on quarterback, if you waited on tight end, you hammer him in round 10. Go get Loveland here. Go get Caleb Williams here. With Raadre, I talked about this in the live stream a couple nights ago, but when we are looking at his viability in your regular ESPN draft, your Yahoo draft, your sleeper draft, while I do think he has a large role early in the season, it's not going to be a large enough role where you can actually put him into your starting lineup. I think he's going to be just pesky enough where we're not that excited about starting Travion Henderson through the first month of the year. Like, he's going to be on the field, don't get me wrong, but he's probably not going to be the receiving back. That's probably going to go over to Travion Henderson. So you're not going to be able to start him early in the season. And if you're not starting him early in the season, we know you're definitely not starting him late in the year when Travion Henderson continues to expand his role. So you're drafting a premium handcuff back at this point, which in that case, why don't you give me Zach Charbonnet, a running back that we've seen have top 5 upside if the starter were to go down in front of him? Or again, why don't you just take the quarterback or tight end if you waited? Now, if you wait this long on tight end, the tight end I would not draft would be Kyle Pitts. What's actually funny is if you look at Kyle Pitts' age 24 season, it was very similar to George Kittle at 24, where Kittle exploded at 25 years old up to 16 points per game. Very similar to another elite prospect coming out, Eric Ebron, who exploded to 14 points per game. Mike Gesicki got better at 24. Brandon Pettigrew got better at 24. Most tight ends in this sample get better from 24 to 25 years old. Now, the issue with Kyle Pitts is you're looking at the opposite trend happening. You have Kyle Pitts getting worse every single season of his NFL career. He is less and less involved. You have year 1, him playing 74% of the snaps. Year 2, that falls to 72%. Year 3, that falls to 65%. And year 4, that falls to 63%. So if we are getting Kyle Pitts less and less on the field, and in this round, you can just take a super safe pick, Dallas Goedert, that you know is going to be out there, I just don't see why you would take picks. Now, I could do the cop-out answer, and I could say don't draft Najee Harris because he only has one eyeball, but you probably already know that. And then the thing that I really want to avoid doing in the last few rounds here will be taking players that you're not going to feel comfortable cutting after week 1. Now, the guys that we want to be drafting in the last 3 or 4 rounds of your draft are running backs that we can say, okay, let me take them and see what their role is week 1. Let me take Jerome Ford. Let me take Dylan Sampson. Let me take Nick Chubb. I mean, if they are starting backs, great. Maybe we know that immediately. And if they are just total dust, which is a high probability, I know I'm going to have players off the waiver wire that I want to pick up. I don't know how much clarity you're going to get with Marvin Mims. Like, if we go ahead and we look at Marvin Mims, what is surprising is his age 22 season was very similar to Jameson Williams. And then obviously Jameson blew up the following year. But if we look at Mims here, you are seeing a wide receiver that fell from 41% of the snaps as a rookie down to 27% of the snaps as a year 2 player. The efficiency was great, 2.85 yards per route run, but he's not used as a traditional receiver. He's used as a kick returner. And they went, oh, okay, we have a thin wide receiver room. We need some weapons here. How do we get the kick return of the ball? So I don't see how Mims gives you like some league winning upside in your regular redraft league. Obviously, best ball may be different. Isaac Grindo got injured in camp. Yes, you also have Jordan James getting injured, but the Niners are bringing in running backs. I think Grindo's just a handcuff and that's it. And he goes kind of in the same round as Dylan Sampson, Jerome Ford, Nick Chubb, running backs that could be legitimate starters week 1. And then Adam Thielen, I have no idea why you'd waste a pick on Adam Thielen. Again, you could always go to the waiver wire and pick up somebody that profiles to give you okay production at wide receiver, I'd rather take the swing at one of the running backs at the very end of your draft. But I think that's all I got for you. I really hope I was able to help you out with this video. And of course, it's not too late. If you are not already a member of the Flock, we still have the $34 season pass available to you. You can find the link to flockfantasy.com in the description and comment section. If you use code FLOCK, I'm going to be answering your start sit questions and your trade questions during the season. And you're going to be getting access to everybody's draft guides, everybody's rankings, all the site tools, all available until January 1st. Again, not a subscription, just a one-time payment. But I think that's all I got for you. Appreciate you. And I hope I get to see you out with the live stream later tonight.